Robby, what's on your radar today?
Well, NBC News has hired recently departed Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel as an on-air contributor, and people are fleeing for their safe spaces. Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison said that McDaniel is a proven liar and that she has no place in an honest and objective conversation about the future of this country. Former Republican representative turned arch-Trump critic Liz Cheney similarly accused McDaniel of engaging in criminality and depravity. Some of the angriest voices are actually coming from within NBC itself. One retired NBC producer urged viewers to boycott the channel until McDaniel is fired. And he was hardly alone in expressing fury. Chuck Todd, former host of NBC's Meet the Press, appeared on his old show with host Kristen Welker over the weekend and savaged his own network for hiring McDaniel after all of the, quote, gaslighting that went on at the RNC during her reign. He went on to suggest that the network had put Welker, who had actually just interviewed McDaniel, in a horrible position. Let's watch some of his criticism.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for it. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with. Yeah. Is she speaking for herself, or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here?
And then there was this from MSNBC morning host Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski.
Hiring a former RNC chair, Ronna McDaniel.
Well, she was on Sunday's Meet the Press. It was her first appearance since NBC News hired her as a political analyst. I know you won't be surprised to know that we've been inundated with calls this weekend, as have most people connected with this network, about NBC's decision to hire her. We learned about the hiring when we read about it in the press on Friday. We weren't asked our opinion of the hiring, but if we were, we would have strongly objected to it for several reasons, including, but not limited to, as lawyers might say, Ms. McDaniel's role in Donald Trump's fake elector scheme.
All of this hand-wringing because a news and politics channel hired a Republican politico to give campaign commentary? Have people lost their minds? After all, it's not as if such a hiring is a strange occurrence. Indeed, Todd's suggestion that his bosses might have transgressed journalistic norms by hiring and interviewing a political operative with potentially mixed loyalties is pretty rich, considering, well, the existence of Jen Psaki. Psaki, of course, is the anchor of her own show on MSNBC, despite formerly serving as a White House press secretary for President Biden. There was not some significant time gap in between these two positions. On the contrary, she negotiated her move to cable while she was still working in the administration, the exact sin they seem to be talking about here. And of course, she had been a CNN contributor before working for Biden, and prior to that, she was part of the Obama administration. It almost seems like there's a pretty normal revolving door between working in politics and being paid by the media to talk about politics, and that liberal journalists did not particularly find this controversial until a Trump-aligned MAGA Republican did it. Need more examples? Well, there's Simone Sanders, who jumped from the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign to CNN, then joined the Biden campaign in 2020, became a spokesperson for Vice President Kamala Harris, and finally ended up with her own show at MSNBC. To be clear, this practice hardly confined to MSNBC. In fact, hiring former Washington insiders to provide commentary is standard practice within cable news. Donna Brazile, who has previously served as acting chair of the DNC, has been a paid contributor on CNN, ABC, and Fox News. Fox also employs Dana Perino, a former Bush spokesperson, and of course ABC News famously hired George Stephanopoulos, a former communications director in the Bill Clinton White House, to serve as a correspondent and political analyst, even though he had no previous journalism experience whatsoever. So any media figure at MSNBC, or any other network, frankly, who finds the McDaniel hire to be unethical in terms of journalism has only obtained these ethics very recently. So what's really going on here, of course, is that said media figures simply don't like McDaniel. They think the work she did at the RNC on behalf of Trump was evil and that her opinions are odious, and they are entitled to feel that way. Indeed, McDaniel can and should face relentless scrutiny for the events she presided over. But that's the solution. Just actually question her, grill her if you must. Is this not what opinion commentary shows are for? Debate and argument? In fact, despite Todd's comments that audiences might be so scandalized by having to hear from McDaniel at all, Welker handled the interview just fine. She asked McDaniel questions about her tenure and her relationship with Trump, and McDaniel answered those questions. No one was harmed during the making of Meet the Press. Viewers didn't exactly need a trigger warning that they were about to meet a Republican.
Yeah, one of the most unhinged aspects of that Chuck Todd exchange is the way approaching a seasoned journalist, a host of Meet the Press, like, I'm so sorry you were put in that position, as though she had no agency and wasn't able to competently conduct that interview.
You're so right. It was very patronizing, actually.
Indeed. So, this, you're right, is completely unhinged. And I think some Republicans would push back, some Democrats would push back and say, well, the issue isn't just hiring people who used to work in administrations, it's particularly hiring a Republican. To that end, you left off one big one, which is Nicole Wallace, who was Bush II's press secretary. Yes. And people might have forgotten, but back in the day, Democrats reviled George Bush. I won't say the same way that they reviled Donald Trump, but in the wake of the Iraq War and the mission accomplished banners and Jon Stewart coming on TV and talking about every, gaffe and silly thing that he said, the idea of associating yourself with George W. Bush was really a bad thing. And so for everyone to just have memory hold the fact that not just a contributor, but a primetime show host in Nicole Wallace was literally Bush II spokeswoman, and to have the audacity to then go on TV and say the world is ending, the sky is falling because they're going to hire Ronna McDaniel is outrageous.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, these people are their friends now. This has happened so many times. And the idea, they were trying to say, well, when she was negotiating it, she was still in the RNC. Come on, Jen Psaki was clearly still part of the administration.
Right,
she didn't take a year off from commentary. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And I actually thought the interview Kristen Welker did was good.
Yeah.
Ronna McDaniel was pretty blunt about how her relationship with Trump soured. She called out the DNC for not doing debates. She said, you know what, we did debates. That made Trump mad. And so here I am. But we were going to do them because it was important. I thought it was a very worthwhile interview, which is why it was so weird to have Chuck Todd being like, are you okay? Because that was just unfair to you. And he wouldn't shut up about it. She was like, okay, well, you don't need to. She was not happy about how he was framing it.
Everybody else at the table in that clip looks uncomfortable.
Yes.
Everyone else looks uncomfortable. And by the way, I do think also there is a sort of they're admitting that it's about MAGA. Like I hear people making the argument defending Chuck Todd, saying, well, MAGA is different than Republicans. MAGA is different than these other people. But that's sort of the point. That's sort of the problem, that you guys are having this outsized reaction. I mean, we didn't even talk about the fact that Joe Scarborough is a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, you are a Republican, sir. The call is coming from inside the House. You don't care. This isn't about the contributors. MSNBC has more conservative contributors on. Steele. On and on and on.
As long as they hate Trump.
As long as they hate Trump. And that is the line. That's why they're all focused on this MAGA being the line. Because if you are a never Trump Republican, you are frankly more welcome than anyone, even a tiny bit to the left of Joe Biden. They're going to be more kind to a never Trump Republican than a Bernie Sanders or an Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib any day of the week. Look how frequently never Trump Republicans come on. Or even, frankly, Tea Party-style Republicans. Byron Johnson, who was one of the Byron Donalds, who was one of the potential speaker candidates during the rigmarole earlier last year. Even he can get a speaking position and regularly appear on the program as long as it's about conflict within the Republican Party. But the line is, this really firm line is, you can't join the club unless you're going to join us in our particular hatred for the MAGA movement.
And they didn't offer her own show like Jen Psaki and Nicole Wallace. They're going to ask her for her opinion on what's going on. And the way they've reacted, like I used the safe space and trigger warnings dichotomy because it was a little bit familiar of that very mockable campus tendency. I don't think it speaks well of their ability to cover and understand and explain a significant chunk of the Republican Party, a significant part of the country, frankly, when they had this level of discomfort with even just sitting next to someone who was formerly in that part of it and might be able to speak to that those voters. Very, very telling series of events.
Yeah, and your point about the debates is a good one too. Having someone on the network that is willing to raise substantive criticisms of the Democratic Party and point out the ways that it is in fact being undemocratic as it pitches itself as the cure to saving democracy, as the path to saving democracy against the threat of Donald Trump, I think is just a bridge too far for them.
Very much so. Well, we'll see how this shapes up. More Rising right after this.
I lost my train of thought, but what I want